Welcome back. You tune in the talking point and talking indeed. We are here only on Salam Media, your online humanitarian platform. And now, activism in another dimension. From environmental, we're moving to education. And I'm joined now by Irfan Mangera. He's youth activism program manager at the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. And so they had a consultation, United Nations Transforming Education Youth Declaration online consultation, and this was held on the 27th of July. And hence, I'm connecting with Irfan Mangera to find out how was the response and the outcome, and why do we need to transform our education. So let's welcome Irfan Mangera. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Salam Media.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for having me once again. I'll try to be very quick because there's a lot that happened in the consultation and prior to the consultation. So at the end of June, I was invited to attend a pre-summit on transforming education by UNESCO in the headquarters in Paris, attended by 150 ministers of education and deputy ministers, as well as 2 heads of state, because I think there's been a global shift in how we address education and really putting it back onto the global agenda. What was great to see is lots of young people present and informing those decisions. Coming back from that pre-summit, many of us young people felt the need to further consult youth in order for us to put forward into the youth declaration, which will be presented to the main summit in September. It's a heads of state summit in New York. Now, why we decided to do this kind of grassroots consultation was because we felt that we couldn't just go and give one single voice that we ourselves could give, but rather a collective voice. So the consultation that I had hosted subsequently was there were about 70 different people representing different organizations. It was an online consultation, and the focus was, in South Africa's context, what do we need to do in order to transform education? And I had outlined the 5 action tracks and action points that UNESCO had put into the document, so sort of the concept note. And these 5 really capture what we need to really do in the current state of things in transforming education, which included, number 1, inclusive, equitable, safe, and healthy schools. So this involved really the context of schools, the environment of schools, things like nutrition, things like how do we conduct education in places and countries where there are emergencies and or lots of violence, the issue of gender and violence in communities. The second point was around learning and skills for life. And this entails foundational learning, the kind of skills needed for long-term benefit, for entrepreneurship, for employment. We know in the current context in South Africa that's not being done, and that's why we have such a big crisis as well. The second point also, which I liked really a lot, was, and it perhaps ties into the previous interview you had, was education for sustainable development, and really developing education systems and content that speaks to the needs we face, which includes climate education, for example. The third action track was about teachers, the teaching profession, and teaching in general. So looking at new methodologies for learning. How do we empower teachers? How do we really give teachers more support in carrying out their work? But also what in the profession needs to change and what needs to be developed further. We know teachers today face a whole range of issues. They play multiple roles when they get there every day. But how do we support that and change that so it responds to the needs of not just the teachers, but the entire community and environment they come from? Number 4 in the action track was around digital learning and transformation. This included how do we reshape systems of education to include digital learning, free, open, high quality education content that's accessible. And we know technology has advanced for us to do this. Looking at things like digital citizenship, bridging the digital divide. COVID showed us that you might we went into a system where some schools could go onto Zoom and teach via online platforms, but those who don't have such resources often get left out. Those who don't even have basics like a smartphone or internet access end up being limited in their growth. It also includes privacy, security, and well-being of learners, and using new technologies for strengthening education. Lastly, the fifth point in the action track was about how do we finance this education so that it speaks to each country's needs, and the situation that they faced, but also promoting of equity and efficiency in the spending of education. We know too well that just throwing money doesn't solve an issue, but we do need money, but using that money wisely and effectively in order to build and develop the changes we need into the system. So that was sort of an encapsulating of the discussion. In a lot of the viewpoints from young people in South Africa were about decolonizing the curriculum, were about the issue of making sure the basics are done. There's pit toilets still, there's infrastructure backlogs, and we were grateful that our partners, Equal Education, and other education organizations and interested people were in this consultation. We were able to give different views. I mean, I can expand on that, but I feel like at this point I'm just saying a lot of things.
No, a lot of important things. You're not saying a lot of things, about a lot of vital things. And look, education is my passion. I am a early childhood development specialist, practitioner, and everything education is close to my heart. So what you're saying was very, very comprehensive in, I think, every facet you covered, everything from finance to education to curriculum development to, I mean, hearing what's aligned to grassroots level. And for me, when you said something, your last point here, not only decolonizing education, but you know what? Let's move forward because today our learners are global citizens. So via all social media platforms, you don't only have your school friends. In fact, I now counsel, and people tell me I don't have many peers at school who are my friends, but all my friends are all around the world. So we connect and we engage, and that's so. For me, the focus should be on how to educate a global citizen and align degrees, align life skills in that, because many young graduates that are now wanting to uh, hone in their skills overseas or globally, they find they stuck in terms of even the degree. So let's talk about the teaching degree. We have a 4-year teaching degree,
Hmm.
a bachelor of education. When you look at that in a country like Australia, that is regarded as a lesser degree, especially for high schools, FET. If you want to be a specialist physics teacher, then ideally you need to have a Bachelor of Science and then your PGC, because that's how it works globally. Not this one degree. Yeah, that helps for foundation and intermediate phase, but not for secondary school. So you need to align it. Secondly, most of our schools are English medium schools, but yet South Africa is regarded as a non-English speaking country. So when a professional like an educator wants to hone in or even gain some experience overseas, they have to write that exams now, academic exams, because they've learned English in school, have English medium university. Yes, now they have to prove that they're English speaking. So there are various constraints here. And I think as much as we want to
Absolutely.
change the curriculum, we need to start aligning our curriculum, and we all need to see ourselves as global players and no more. Yes, we have our country boundaries, whatever. We do have patriots. That is all important. But if South Africa, and if we want to gear our students to uh, uh, be role players on the international platform, then we need to train them to be global citizens. And also, we need to frame their minds and the youth's minds like this so that they can reach higher in terms of they can make their mark globally.
Absolutely. I mean, I studied education. I did that same 4-year degree you're speaking of. I subsequently did a honors in education policy, leadership and management. But today I see myself in a completely different role. Also, involving lots of civic and human rights education, but fundamentally using those tools around how do people learn, how do we enable an environment where people can learn about social issues and develop them further. So I come from that background, and that's why I think my passion for education has continued. But I think the points you make is that we at a point where the current system isn't working. But if anything, you can speak of stats nonstop. I mean, the 4 out of every 10 learners are dropping out of school or not finishing matric. You get the entire journey of schooling. In fact, it's much more.
So,
But
Irfan, just to interject you there, it's because it's boring. This curriculum is so boring. It's just so content heavy. You and I will also be disinterested in school if we have to learn what we need to learn, do those laborious assignments, learning assist. Even as a teacher, you feel frustrated because what can you do? There's so much. So let's just be honest. It's not an engaging, stimulating curriculum. And as educators, because of your administrative duties and it, you just have very very little room to maneuver in terms of that. You can't even let out that creativity. So behind you there, I'm seeing that chalkboard. uh, I use the chalkboard. My father, my mother, my grandfather use that same chalkboard learning. I mean, we have these tablets and smartphones where even the 4-year-olds are engaging, can tell me the YouTube icon, they can connect with each other. They phone grandparents all the time themselves, but yet we still educating them in something for me that's obsolete. So really, and I know we're failing our children all the time. And I think in just as much as we speak about the curriculum, I think it's time now for action. And as I've seen Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman says, in one of his talks, he's a rule breaker and he just has to go this way through the system. And I think that's what we need to do for the benefit. We need to now, as ordinary citizens, I know you're part of Musa, that's education transformational group as well. And I think civic organizations need to soldier on ahead if we are going to change things in and the change the status quo in our education system.
yes, yes, yes. I'm glad you pointed this out because I use this just for my own planning as a team and
Yes.
internal organizational stuff. But if you see the stats and trends, a 30-second video on TikTok is what is going to educate young people. Because that's what you're constantly engaged in every day and for hours and hours. So we have to think creatively on the packaging, on the methodology, on the pedagogical choices we choose, because we have to also contextualize the environments. In South Africa, yes, you and I might come from this kind of privilege where we have this access, but majority don't. So the questions on transforming education linger in different areas. It differs by geographical area, by social area, and so on. But I fully agree. The model that we use is based on a banking model. This is the information. Take it, produce it and you'll get assessed on this, and that's it. So there's very minimal learning actually taking place, and learning from a perspective that it's going to be there for lifelong, for till the end of your day. And we can regularly test this theory because you can go to any I can speak to any of my peers. We can't even remember what we did in science or math in one class because we just did it for the sake of doing it to pass, and that was it. And I think you're right. It needs to be engaging. You have to have the fun elements to learning. Learning needs to be fun. It needs to be a space where you can actively practice what is it you're learning. And that's why we're saying the design of the entire institutional framework must change, but it must change such that we don't leave anyone behind in this process. We must be very
Inclusive.
particular about the equity question in South Africa, because too often we forget that the majority of the country still doesn't have the kind of access and benefits that many of us do. And equally speaking, we all have that responsibility to be tackling this. It's not something government can do alone. It's not something education practitioners can do alone, which is why I've also deliberately didn't go into the profession. I think my biggest contribution can come from outside because I can assist and draw the links where needed. We can capacitate civil society, we can use media platforms and so on. but coordinate this so that we ensure there's collective vision for what needs to happen, and we all then exercise our day-to-day lives in order to bring us closer to that vision. Otherwise, expecting some person or some institution alone to solve the issues will never result in any change. We actually all bear the responsibility. Teachers, principals, learners, um, everyone in society has that responsibility, as you said.
Are we engaging? So, have you or has the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, have you engaged with the various stakeholders? Do you have a think tank set here, a time frame? We all know there's something, as Shakespeare said, there's something rotten in the state of Denmark, there's something rotten in the state of our educational uh, system. I mean, we all acknowledge it. Even government has now acknowledged this. And has there been some action or goal orientated in a time frame put here? Because you know what, we can have this discussion every now and then and so often, but are there concrete steps being taken?
So I think the one big thing for me as well in this entire process was to know again, what role do I play? And I can say that the partners we work with, Equal Education, Zero Dropout Campaign, and many others who are directly, their main focus as organizations is in the education sector, whereas our work cross cuts. It's about youth engagement, youth capacitation as young leaders and activists. We also do other work in the education space. In fact, my colleague Rita Bile is currently working on anti-racism education and how we can create a national blueprint and policy document that can go out to every school. So that's where we contribute. That's where we also link up. But I'm increasingly seeing the need for us to convene and to create this space where people can engage. And I think we've done that through the consultation. But again, working with our partners who are directly involved in those deliberations. In fact, there's a recent piece of legislation that was put out for public comment, and our partners at Equal Education reached out to us and many others to say, can we take this further into civil society? Because what that legislation said was that they're going to um, take away deadlines for delivering on some services, and one of those key things was setting deadlines for eradicating pit toilets, for example, in schools. Now, you can't take away that, because what that means is if you take away a deadline, you can go sing till 50, 60, 100 years and you won't have a deadline put to when we're going to actually eradicate pit toilets. So in that sense, we work quite collectively with a lot of our strategic partners in this field. But because we are quite broad in our work, ours is not just education alone, but education, racism, anti-corruption, democracy building, liberation history, and so on and so on. We intend to work with partners who then we can find ways to collectively deal with this.
So I like to wish you well and acknowledge the foundation, Ahmed Kafara Foundation, as well as all your partners that you collaborate with. And you know what? At this platform, we feel so proud. Like I said it to my previous guest, that despite or in spite of all the challenges we have in South Africa, we have amazing advocacy groups, and I think that's where our strength is. We have amazing NGOs that hold government to account, that are let's revolutionists in terms of bringing forth or demanding the change and saying we want change, and force government to relook at their policies and force them into action and hold them accountable. So I think that's the strength and the positive for me for South Africa is this, and the strength of our democracy is our non-governmental organization, our advocacy groups, and our passionate young South Africans and old South Africans like myself. We're providing a platform here to make South Africa a true rainbow nation that it is. So, in spite of our load shedding and every challenge and money being misappropriated, and that for every one of that, we are 10 good advocacy groups that are being the instrument for change, and we are positive because this is our home, and it's all of us. It's our civic duty to ensure that if we want to live in a positive, beautiful, harmonious country, then the change starts with us and our mindset and our action. So continue the good work, and inshallah we can chat to you again and connect to see how far we've come in terms of making education dynamic, and also, like you say, equity. I would one day love to go to a school in the Eastern Cape and they have a smart board there, because then I know that will be the benchmark that, you know what, we have arrived in terms of education, and we are now fulfilling our mandate to provide every learner with a quality education. Shukran for joining us, and we wish you well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much for hosting this. I do look forward to many more. If anything, the last thing I want to say is, as you said, we can't find hope. We can find hope in every space we look at, from this conversation, the previous one, everywhere we go, there is hope. So there is a sense of hopelessness, but if we just look hard enough and we work hard enough, we can inspire hope and change every single way, every single place we are in, and everywhere we go. Thank you so much for hosting me. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. And this has been the talking point. And indeed, we had a lot to talk about. And my apologies that I'm a little over time, but it's been such engaging, empowering, informative discussions. And yes, that's what we do here on your online humanitarian platform, to say uh, how we provide and amplify voices for everybody. You don't have to be part of a major organization, NPO, NGO, just you ordinary citizen. Your small difference is the change, and you can be the change. So it's ordinary citizens that make the extraordinary difference. May you be under the mercy and the protection of the Almighty. Until next time on the talking point, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.